What's going on, guys? This is the Wisdom Matrix, and this video is about what actual, what blame, judgment, and criticism actually does, and what it actually does is it tries to separate you from whatever it is you're trying to criticize or judge or blame or whatever. Your ego is trying to separate. Your ego is creating this barrier between you and whatever object it is that you're trying to criticize or whatever. And, this is why it's important to be aware of what you're doing, because awareness is like, it's like it's a device to help you become more aware. Awareness leads to more awareness. Observation leads to more awareness. Because, what's happening when you're becoming more aware is that your awareness is becoming stronger. It's becoming more, able to focus on itself and on thoughts and emotions and all that stuff. And as I've said before, lots of times when your thoughts and emotions are when they're happening, it feels like you are these things, that you're not, just aware of them. Which is why awareness is extremely important. You should be aware all the time as much as you can. Observe these things. Observe awareness itself. But back to my original subject. What blame and criticism are doing is it's whenever you're blaming or judging or criticizing anything or anyone, what's happening is that you're avoiding the inner world. You're avoiding yourself, and you're trying to put a barrier between you and the thing that you don't like. You're separating yourself even further. Blame, judgment, and criticism is how the ego keeps itself in place, because stress and worry and all these negative, so-called negative emotions and thoughts are used to keep the ego in place. The thing to notice about the ego is that the ego actually does not want to be happy. If it does, it doesn't want to be happy for very long, because if it does, it's going to start to disappear, because the ego isn't actually, after all these things. And in actuality, what it's after is, to try and keep itself separate from everything, because once it becomes one with everything, the ego is going to disappear. And so the ego tries to keep everything at a distance. And it'd be fine if it did it in a way of emotional distance, not necessarily distance without love or anything, but like distance from your own ideological point of view or something like that. But that's not what it does. What it does is it distances itself from this other thing by blaming it, judging it, criticizing it, or calling it annoying, which is judgment. And this is how it keeps itself in place. This is how the ego keeps doing what it's doing, keeps existing. So the thing to do isn't to just stop criticizing, because you're going to, want to criticize things. And the ego is going to say, well, criticism can be legitimate or whatever. And this is where you become aware. This is why it's important to become aware of your emotions and your thoughts when you're criticizing. What is actually happening inside of you when you become critical? Are you actually becoming grateful for what is, or are you becoming unhappy, miserable, angry, or whatever because of this thing that you're criticizing? Are you actually making things better by criticizing? Are you actually trying, fixing anything, or are you actually making, the situation worse? Criticism never makes the situation better for the most part. Like, whenever I try not to criticize, but I've fallen into this trap too, because the ego can be kind of a tricky thing to work with sometimes. But whenever this happens, usually the other party, that's criticized or whatever, doesn't actually say, oh, well, you know what, maybe you have a point here, right? Because criticism isn't usually done from like a place of love or whatever. If it were, it wouldn't really be criticism. It'd be more of a, statements of what is type of thing. What actually happens when you criticize is that the other party then feels threatened because it has its sense of self connected to the things that you're criticizing. So it'll start criticizing back, it'll start judging back, leading to more criticism and attack and all this stuff. This is why politics is so divided. This is why, when I try and talk about politics, I try to talk about more of ideas rather than people. And, this is why it's important to be aware of what you're doing, what's happening when you're criticizing. Because lots of times it's coming from a place of lack, of insufficiency within the ego. It's not actually coming from, a place of wanting to help. It's coming from a place of, well, this person's, an asshole, so I'm going to criticize this person or something like that. And that's how the ego separates itself from everything else. Tries to dehumanize other things, other people. It just tries to dehumanize people. This is how, Hitler got away with the things that he got away with, because, he was dehumanizing, these other groups. This is why racism and hatred and stuff like that exists, because of judgment, because of prejudice. All prejudice means is prejudgment, judgment before, you actually meet somebody or whatever. And judgment itself is the same way. And, like I said, you don't have to stop criticizing or, stop judging or anything like that, because all you really have to do, really, if you want to, start noticing this, is to just become aware of what's happening inside of you, what you're doing when you're criticizing or judging or blaming or whatever it is you're doing, because this starts to lessen the effect that the ego has upon you and everybody else around you. Because the more aware you become, the more aware, you can start to, notice how unaware criticism and judgment and blame makes you. So, I might do a video about some other things later. I don't know what will happen. We'll see what happens. But anyways, this was just a more in-depth explanation of why criticism and judgment and blame doesn't really work too well. Labeling is the same thing. Same difference, I guess, between judgment and labeling, criticism, blame, whatever you want to call it. Same thing. Just a way to keep it that the ego tries to keep itself in place. So, anyways, if this is the Wisdom Matrix, if you like this video, please like it. Subscribe and share it with others so that if you got some kind of benefit from it, so they can get the same benefits as you did. This is the Wisdom Matrix, and if you do want to become less, negative or, less, criticizing or whatever it may be, just become more aware. Just observe what's happening, because observation is it's like a clearing of the mind, because the mind is full of obstacles. Those obstacles is called the ego. The ego is an obstacle to clarity, wisdom, and love, and peace, and silence of the mind, and all these great things, like happiness and stuff like that. So awareness clears these obstacles, not by forcing them to move to the side of the path, but by dissolving them, by showing you what is happening. People say, be mindful, watch your breathing or whatever, but I think the more important thing to do is to watch your mind, watch what you are doing, watch what you are saying, watch what you are, doing, watch these things, because the more observation that you put into these things, the more these things will stop, or the more they will not bother you anymore, because you're clearing the obstacles to who you truly are. Because a lot of these things are not what you are. They're obstacles to noticing what you are. And you can also become aware of awareness. This helps too. What does awareness feel like? What does it seem to be? But this way is maybe easier for some people, at least at first, until they can get glimpses of this silence and stuff like that, and then they can start paying attention to awareness. But that never stop observing yourself and what you're doing, thinking, or saying, because it's going to, you may start reacting again. Reaction is how the ego keeps itself in place. Anyways, this is the Wisdom Matrix. If you like this video, like I said, like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.